There are some religions that have certain relationships to medicine that are influenced by their faith. For instance, the Jehovah's Witnesses don't do blood transfusion. So I am wondering if you experienced similar things with this population.
Not at all. Not at all. When I was working there, we almost had no families that refused to get vaccines. That did come after I left, but almost nobody refused vaccines. They would take medication.
Hello, my name is Frida Weisel, and on this channel I explore Judaism, religion, insular societies, and more. On today's long-form interview series, I am delighted to have as a guest Dr. Howard Rosman. Dr. Rosman has served as a pediatrician to the insular Hasidic community of Williamsburg for 39 years and was the first pediatrician to serve this community. Since this community's relationship to the medical system has come under a lot of scrutiny during COVID and the measles outbreak and so on, and in general, the discussion about the merging of or the intersection between science and religion is very interesting. I thought it would be very illuminating to hear from Dr. Rosman on what his experience was serving this population. So welcome, Dr. Rosman. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this all the way from Israel.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm just going to say this for the viewer. We're having a little bit of issues with the audio, so we're trying our best. We're going to be repeating some of the questions until it's clear. Let's start by hearing from you when you started to serve the Hasidic community and how it came to happen.
I had been in the United States Air Force for 2 years after I finished my training in pediatrics. And I was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I was looking for a job, and I found an ad in the New York Times saying that they're looking for a pediatrician, and the knowledge of Yiddish is very helpful. So since at that time I spoke some Yiddish, I applied for the job, and I figured it was going to be in a Hasidic community, since the Hasidim were the ones and are the ones who are using Yiddish as their language of conversation on a daily basis. And that's how I started to work in Williamsburg, first as an employee of Bikur Cholim de Satmar, had an office on Bedford Avenue, and then afterwards I moved to my own office, first on Marcy and then on Rutledge, where I was for approximately 39 years.
What year was this that you started?
I got out of the 70s. 1976 I started. It was until, I guess, 2015.
And you retired and made Aliyah to Israel?
Not right then. We made Aliyah approximately 8 years ago.
How did you come to speak Yiddish? Or a little bit of Yiddish?
My father's parents lived with us for a long time, and they really only spoke Yiddish. So I learned a little bit just by speaking to my grandparents. Frequently, I walked my grandfather to shul to go to a rabbi's shiur in Gemara, and it was in Yiddish. The shiur was in Yiddish. My grandfather understood it. I didn't understand that much. I understood the Gemara from the language, the Aramaic that the Gemara is written in, and I was able to learn some Yiddish words by listening to the Gemara shiur. When I was a senior in high school, I went to Yeshiva University High School for boys. At that time, we were permitted to take one college course, and the only college course that was permitted to take was Yiddish. So as a senior in high school, I took a course in Yiddish at Yeshiva College. So all in all, I knew a little. I knew a lot of words. I really never spoke in Yiddish to anybody. And for the first few years that I was there, I would understand what the people were saying, and I reluctantly spoke because my accent wasn't so good, and but as after a while, after a few years, I knew that to communicate with the children in the community, I would have to speak to them in Yiddish since they did not speak English, and especially the boys. And to talk to the patients, you have to have some rapport with your patient. Otherwise, it's very difficult treating the kids. So I spoke in Yiddish. They answered in Yiddish. And although the mothers almost all spoke English very well, many of the fathers did not speak English. And I had to speak to them in Yiddish also.
I guess we should establish this for the listener who is unacquainted. You are not Hasidic, right? And as far as
I am not Hasidic. No.
And the community that you served did they have Hasidic doctors?
Okay, so I in Williamsburg, the practice had approximately 98% Hasidim, and the other 2% were Hispanic. All the Hasidim spoke Yiddish. My staff, at the beginning, we had 2 Hasidic women who were working with me, but a lot of, I'd say, almost all of the remainder of the staff were Hispanic. They were all actually Puerto Ricans, and they were lovely women who learned Yiddish to be able to speak to the little boys and girls. And there was one of the medical assistants was so well versed in Yiddish, she would ask the kids if they brushed their teeth that morning, which is something that I'd never did, but she would know everybody's family ties. The women, there are a lot of very large families, and the women were all married. When you have 10 sisters, and this medical assistant knew everyone's sibling and what their married name was.
Wow. This was the Jewish woman or the Puerto Rican woman?
No, the Puerto Rican women. The Puerto Rican women, they were very nice. They were always very nice to the kids. Not only zero anti-Semitism among the staff, but they were all told that they would have to dress a certain way in the office. And they did that when we had Hispanic women who came in and were not dressed up to the standards of the Hasidim. The staff, the Puerto Rican staff, would go over to them and tell them, ask them if they wouldn't mind to put on a lab coat so that the Hasidim wouldn't be offended by the women's dress.
Was pants a problem?
No, as long as they weren't skin tight. And that was, they all wore pants. All my staff wore pants. And none of the Hasidim said a word. It was not skin tight. It was baggy pants.
Okay, so can you explain to the viewer why the Hasidic community needed to put an ad in the New York Times to find a pediatrician, why they wouldn't have their own pediatrician?
The Hasidim, especially the boys, the males, don't really go to school for an extended period of time. They're supposed to go to school through high school, but they really don't are not up to the high school standards of public schools or private schools in New York City. When I was there, and especially when I started, most of them didn't go to school at all. They knew the ABCs, most of them, and they were able to speak a little English as the older they get, but they did not go to graduate school in any way. They never went to college. When I was leaving, I did see one man who was taking college courses remotely, and he was looking to get a college degree. That's one out of thousands.
So what was your experience in the beginning? Was it a culture shock to come into this community and start to serve this population?
Well, no, I took them as they were. Uh, the patients and the families were all extremely, extremely courteous, respectful. Uh, they came to get service, and I was there to give the service. And it, it did not bother me that they were Hasidim. It didn't bother me at all that some of them didn't speak English. I did my best to take care of them. And I have to say, I had a very pleasant time being there.
How did you experience this particular very devout community to bring their faith into medicine?
Actually, I'm Orthodox, so I took advantage of the fact that I was able to go literally next door to daven at different times when I left the office instead of having to find a minyan. And when one of my parents had passed away and I was saying Kaddish, I davened in the small synagogues in the area, and I was accepted as anybody else. One thing that I have to say, if there were 10 men in the main Satmar shul, that would be a minyan. It didn't, 10 men who wanted to daven. And it didn't make a difference if I was dressed in a jacket and a hat, or if I was dressed in short sleeves. And there was one man who came in all the time with the short sleeves, occasionally even short pants in the summertime, and he was counted for a minyan. So I found it. I found that they were very accepting. I always dressed to fit in. I always wore a hat. I always wore a jacket, and if I wanted to daven as the chazan to lead the services, I put on a gartel. The gartel around my waist like a belt, because that was the uniform that you had to have to be the leader. I didn't have one if I wasn't going to be the leader. I found that everybody was very nice. We, in fact, to get some sort of relationship with the children, I would, I have to examine them. So I have to, in that community, it wasn't really the right thing or the proper thing to get people undressed completely. So I picked up the shirts, and the boys under their shirts wear their tzitzit. So I would look at the tzitzit and try to tie the knots, tighten the knots, and make sure that they were okay. So, in fact, when I left, one of the women said that now that I'm not around, there's no one to straighten out her kids, her sons' tzitzit. She had a half a dozen boys, and it's a big thing to straighten out the tzitzit until the boys get a little bit older and can do it themselves. But it's a big deal to be able to straighten out the tzitzit. So I did that, and the boys always asked me, if I also had tzitzit. Sometimes the younger kids, 3-4-year-olds, would ask the mother or the father, Erizayit, in Yiddish saying, is he Jewish? So I would show them my tzitzit, and they were dumbfounded that I also did the same thing. I don't have peyot as they do. And from my understanding, if you don't have peyot, you're not considered to be Jewish. But I would talk to them about what they learned in cheder, in the school, and since most of the time these younger boys would only be learning religious subjects, so I'd ask them about the portion of the week that would be read on Shabbat, and we were able to interact somehow.
So it helped that you were Orthodox. It improved your relationship with your patients.
I think so, although there are There are many doctors in the community who are not Jewish, and they're accepted, and people go to them all the time as primary care doctors. They're accepted very easily by the kids and by the parents. Most of them, if I'm not mistaken, I think they do wear a kippah when they're working, but I'm not certain that they all do.
So, for instance, there are some religions that have certain relationships to medicine that are influenced by their faith. For instance, the Jehovah's Witnesses don't do blood transfusion, as far as I understand. So I am wondering if you experienced similar things with this population.
Not at all. Not at all. When I was working there, we almost had no families that refused to get vaccines. That did come after I left, but almost nobody refused vaccines. They would take medication, although there is one thing that the Hasidic families did many times. They would go to what they would call a big doctor in Manhattan and ask if what I did was right. So they asked who I was. Especially with this one specific pediatrician who they all went to at Mount Sinai. See, he said to them, "Oh, you're seeing Dr. Rosman? Why are you even coming to me?" As if you're seeing me, that's enough.
Yeah. And this community does a lot of internal, like everyone is telling each other their experience with doctors. And if there's a doctor that has a good reputation as a big doctor, then that becomes something that everyone...
I was on one side of Williamsburg, and I had patients from all over. I think I had many of the Israeli women who were married and lived in Williamsburg because they would be more comfortable speaking in Hebrew instead of speaking in Yiddish. And I speak Hebrew, so I was able to interact with them. So they came from all over the area. When I started, there were very few doctors completely in the area. And afterwards, as the years went on, different clinics opened up, and there were many more doctors all over the place. And in fact, one of the community clinics opened down the block from my office, and instead of getting less busy, I was more busy after they opened up.
Why?
I have no idea. Maybe they might have gone to the clinic because they had a lot of specialty doctors there, and my office was only a pediatric office. We had a few doctors there, but it was only pediatrics. We didn't have any dermatology or ENT. But they might have gone to an ENT down the block and then say, okay, they might as well come and see me. But I don't know. I have no idea. But that was the experience I had.
So why do you think people were okay with vaccinating? There's this big controversy about this population and vaccines. What was your experience where the attitudes towards vaccines?
As I said, when we started, I would recommend that they would get the vaccines according to the schedule that the American Academy of Pediatrics said was the right schedule. And I would think for 20, 30 years, no one said boo. They just accepted it. And in my office, I gave the vaccines. I didn't have a nurse give the vaccines. I would give the injections. And sometimes there were 4 or 5 different injections that had to be given. And the parents didn't care. I was able to give vaccines. I have to say my wife is a nurse, and she taught me how to give injections many years ago. And many times after I finished giving the vaccines, the kid would say, "So when are you going to give me the injection?" I had already done it.
Uh-huh. And then you gave a lollipop?
Never.
Never?
Never had any sweet things to give out. We had other things that we gave out, little toys or other things.
Why?
It's not good for your teeth. Although there was a pediatric dentist right on top of me in the office on the second floor, but we'd never give out sugary stuff. And even now, in the Beit Knesset and shul, the shul I go to has a whole package of lollipops or candies. And since they thought I was, like you mentioned, that I gave out candies to my office, so I'm the one that gives it out. But before I give it to any of the children, I ask the parents if it's okay. Sometimes the kids could be diabetic, or the parents just don't want sugared stuff to be given to their kids. So I ask the fathers if it's okay to give the kids a lollipop.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. So what do you think, what I really want to hear, part of what I want to hear in this conversation is more about how this population sees medicine, because the narrative that is often propagated in the media is that this population is anti-science. During COVID, it was very controversial because of reluctance to shut down at the same pace. I'm sure you had the same thing in Israel, and I'm sure you followed that story. So I want to hear if you can tell me more about attitudes towards medicine and how they might have evolved.
Okay. My understanding and my experience was that the population did not know that much about science or about medicine. They were not taught that in school. The boys, for sure not. And the girls, I don't think they were taught that much. Basically, whatever I said went. If I said you had to do this, they did that. If I said you have to use this medicine, they did it. And I was the authority figure, and they listened to it. And they would occasionally check with the doctor up in Mount Sinai, and they'd always came back that, yeah, I was doing the right thing. I was not an alarmist. If I told people that they had to go to the hospital, they had to go to the hospital. And my staff told them that, and even the people on Hatzalah, the emergency services, would tell them also, yeah, if Dr. Rosman says you have to go, you have to go. Part of the whole setup when being a pediatrician, there are people, families who call you in the evening or on the weekends. Well, I was in the office on Sunday most of the time, so being there on Sunday wasn't a major problem. But on Shabbos, I really would not get any calls from the patients. I would get calls from the Hatzalah members, from the emergency services, to see what they have to do with a patient that they're treating who is my patient. I have to say, I loved being there, and the patients were respectful, and they listened to what you said. There were one or two times where I had to go in to pronounce that someone who had passed away, and they were very sorry to bother me, but I was the patient's pediatrician, and there's no one around, so I went back to Williamsburg, and I pronounced them.
What do you mean? I'm not sure. Who was sorry to bother you?
The patients were always sorry to bother me whenever they called, no matter when it was. I'm sorry to disturb you. That's the first thing out of their mouth. I'm sorry to disturb you, but I have this, I have that, and something's wrong. And most of the time, I'd say almost all the time, when I got calls from patients in Williamsburg, it was always something important. It was not for nothing, to refill a prescription, or when are you going to be in the office? Nothing there was something seriously wrong with their child, and they had a question. It was valid to call. I never minded when people called. It didn't bother me.
Did people sometimes go to the rabbi to consult on medical procedures?
I do have smicha, so I am a rabbi, but I don't know if I ever advertised that in the office. Actually, I did. When I graduated college, I got a degree to be a Hebrew teacher. That was in Hebrew. And that I put up on the wall in the office, not where I was seeing patients, but in one of the offices where the secretary said the men would read it. And it did not say that I was a rabbi. When I did get smicha, I put up a copy of that also in the office. So then they knew that I was a rabbi. But they didn't ask me for Shaila to answer halachic questions. They asked me for medical questions. And that's, I could tell them that according to the halacha, you can't do this and that. They didn't necessarily ask, but I would give them, because I knew that no matter what I said, they would have to ask their own rabbis for the definitive answer.
In what instance would you say, according to the halacha, Jewish law, you can't do this or that? How would that apply?
Taking medication on Shabbat, or eating or drinking on Yom Kippur, things like that. Most of the kids that I saw were under bar mitzvah. They were not 13 or 12 for girls, and it didn't make too much of a difference. If they had to take the medicine, they took the medicine. But when they're older, sometimes you have to know how to get around the medicine also. If you're taking medicine once a day, so the best way to take it is to take it in the afternoon or evening. And then on a fast day, you take it before the fast, and then you can take it after the fast. If you take medication in the morning, you should take it on a daily basis at the same time. That's the best way to take your medicine. But that's not the best way halachically. It's better to take it at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you take it after Yom Kippur, that's 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. That's only a few hours different. That's what.
Aha. Was there ever an issue that medicine wasn't kosher?
The main question was for Pesach, to see if the medicine had chametz in it. So we had lists of medications. We also had guidelines from many places that if you have to take a medication on Pesach, then you take the medicine because you have to take it. If there's a non-chametz alternative, then it's preferable to do that. But all tablets have a combination of meat and milk. Any tablet, because the filler is lactose, and lactose is milk. It's derived from milk, and the binding agent is magnesium stearate, which comes from meat. So, and that's true for any pill you take. But we're not eating the pills; we're swallowing the pills. So, swallowing a pill is not the way that you eat. Normally, we eat things; we chew it up with our teeth. But swallowing something whole is not eating. So, therefore, according to the halacha, at least my halacha, you're allowed to swallow pills, even though they're all basar v'chalav, they're all meat and milk. And some people in Williamsburg would put some tissue paper around the pill and take it that way. Some of them would open up capsules because the capsule is made from gelatin, but you open it up, and then that defeats the purpose of the covering, and that's not really good for the medicine, for you taking the medicine.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Gelatin, you mean gelatin as in?
Gelatin, by definition, is not kosher. It comes from animal bones. We swallow gelatin tablets all the time. Now there's a wave of having gelatin made from vegetables and not from animal bones, but still the majority of gelatin tablets are non-kosher. But everyone takes it because, again, you're swallowing it and eating it.
When it comes to the vaccine debate, a lot of the narrative we hear is that people who don't take vaccines don't take it because it's not kosher, because there's not kosher animal product in it.
If you're not eating it, it doesn't make a difference if it's kosher or not. Diabetics take insulin, and insulin frequently is made from pig. But you're not eating it by mouth. You're taking it as an injection. That is perfectly acceptable halachically. Any vaccines that might not be kosher, I have no idea of the kosher status of the vaccines. There's only one or two that are really given by mouth, and those are usually given to babies, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. That really doesn't have any application here.
So why do you think more people are reluctant to vaccinate nowadays?
Okay, I am very thankful that I was not working when that was coming out. The last maybe year, there were many more people who were reluctant to give vaccines. Most of them were reluctant to take all the vaccines that I recommended at one time. So we would have them come in. They didn't mind to take the vaccines every week, to take one instead of taking a half a dozen at one time. But so they would come in more often, and we'd give fewer vaccines more often. When they wanted to give a smaller dose of the vaccine, that was a complete waste of time, because it had no effect, and because you gave two halves of the amount that you were supposed to give a week apart, neither one had any benefit at all. And why this happens, I don't know. I do know that there are certain people who write in various, not medical journals, but in magazines that they would get in the Hasidic community, that the vaccines are harmful, they're going to kill you, that's just not true. And I would go over with them, vaccine by vaccine, why they were important. Each one, what the vaccine was given to prevent, and why that illness was really very, very important to prevent. These, the whooping cough is pertussis, so many doctors now never see anybody with whooping cough because you give the vaccine and no one gets it. When I was in training, I saw babies under a year old on respirators because they had whooping cough. And not all of them lived through it. It was very, very dangerous. So you didn't want to get whooping cough. You didn't want babies to get whooping cough. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was either 2 weeks ago, a baby in Israel died from whooping cough. The recommendation now is that the mother gets the whooping cough vaccine before she delivers her baby, so she wouldn't give it to the baby. This baby was too young to have gotten the vaccine, but somebody else in the family had gotten whooping cough from the mother, and they gave it to the baby, and the baby died.
Very sad. But did you see vaccine injuries? Maybe that's a part of what is happening here, that the pushback is happening from voices who experience vaccine injuries?
I'm very reluctant to say that any of the vaccines had significant side effects that caused people to have problems. The big vaccine that supposedly had side effects was the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine that supposedly caused autism or other deficiencies, and that just has never been proven scientifically that it happened. The one person, I think his name was Wakefield, was an English doctor who falsified his data. He drew blood from children who came to his kids' birthday parties without their parents' knowledge, and he then used that blood to do some testing on, and then he falsified the data because the testing wasn't to his favor, and he lost his license to practice medicine because of what he did. But he published it, and it went around like wildfire in all around the whole world. And people say, "Oh, you get autism." Autism is a problem that shows up after kids are a year old. It's interaction with family, with friends, whatever, and you don't see it until you're over a year old. And that's when you give the vaccine. So it's coincidental. It's not causative.
Let's move on from vaccines. Was there like a big, or I'm sure there was more than one in your long career, big medical, like an outbreak or a situation that you could especially highlight?
We had an outbreak of mumps in Williamsburg, and we also had an outbreak of hepatitis. Hepatitis A was very, very common, and people would come in to get gamma globulin that you no longer can get. And now we have a vaccine against it. Hepatitis A is not really a bad illness to have, but occasionally you can have some side effects that affect the liver for long periods of time. But you feel a little nauseated, you may be a little yellow, you have stomach aches, and then after a week or so it goes away. It's transmitted by food, by eating food. So if somebody in the family, if the mother has hepatitis A, she'll give it to her whole family. And because the families are very large in Williamsburg, when a family has it, there can be a dozen kids having it. And then they would go to school, and they would go, the sanitary conditions in the school building were not the best. Most of the time, there was never any soap in the bathrooms for people to wash their hands with, and they would just wash their hands with a ritual hand washing, but not to get any dirt off their hands. So the hepatitis A was big, and mumps was also a big epidemic among teenagers. And the problem with mumps is that it can affect a man's fertility because it inflames the testicles. So I spoke with the Commissioner of Health of New York City, and she was very happy because most of these kids had gotten vaccines for measles, mumps, and rubella when they were younger. And not one of them got any side effects, not side effects of infertility, or second side effect is hearing loss. And not one of the hundreds of boys that got it, boys and girls, not one of them got any hearing loss, and none of the boys had the infertility. So the Commissioner of Health of New York said, "Oh, see, that's wonderful. The vaccines did their job. They had mild diseases, but no side effects. We gave the immunizations not to prevent the swelling in the neck that you get with mumps, but rather to prevent the severe side effects. A permanent hearing loss is permanent. Infertility can be permanent." So she was very happy that there was none of that in the Hasidic community.
Speaking of the hepatitis issue, was there an effort to change hand washing rituals? Because the ritual is you come out of the bathroom, you pour 6 times water on the hand without soap.
If your hands are dirty, then you should wash them with soap. If you go to the bathroom and you get some urine or stool on your hands, you should wash them with soap and then dry them and then do the ritual hand washing. But if there's no soap in the bathrooms in school, that's a problem.
Was there an effort to try to change that?
Yes. A lot of the parents went to the schools, and from what I understand, they never listened. I don't know what it is now, but at that time they never listened. They never put soap in the bathrooms.
I think that's changed now, especially with COVID and the measles outbreak. As far as I know,
it could be. I was not around during COVID.
Do you want to talk about any other medical instances that are interesting before I go away from medicine for a little?
My experience in Williamsburg, as I mentioned to you, the patients listened to what I had to say. They took the medicine that they were supposed to be taking. Many of them wouldn't take vitamins on a regular basis, or vitamin D. But that's true in all different communities, not just in the Hasidic community. But I found they were very compliant. So,
did people have vitamin D deficiencies from wearing so modest garb?
It is very common for Muslim women to be vitamin D deficient. Most of the time, they don't take vitamin D supplements, and women wear these burqas top to bottom, clothed with black cloth. There were cases where Muslim women did get vitamin D deficient. When we tested, and we did routinely test teenagers, everybody is vitamin D deficient. But I had a practice in a non-Hasidic area, and that was true for teenagers there too. It didn't make a difference. Everyone's vitamin D deficient. No matter what you take, how much milk you drink, you're not going to get enough vitamin D. And if you say, well, go out in the sun, well, having my face exposed or my legs exposed is not sufficient. You have to go out in a pair of short pants the whole day to have enough vitamin D from the sun. So everybody has to be taking vitamin D supplements, and not everybody is.
Yeah, I'm also deficient. My son is also deficient in vitamin D. And, it's hard to take supplements. It's hard to remember. What about genetic counseling? Was it something did you see Tay-Sachs, which is a genetic-born terrible condition, and did you see it change because of genetic counseling?
Right. So, okay, I didn't have any experience with any genetic diseases in the office, and I never spoke to them about genetics. That if they were married, then they were married. If the way they have problems with genetics by marrying a close family member, so they're not going to marry their brother or sister, but they do marry cousins. And the Hasidim do marry their cousins. It's not infrequent. And it's a possibility of having problems. Most of the time, no, all the time, I never saw the babies in the hospital. I saw the babies when they brought him out of the hospital and into the office. So the baby could be a week old or 6 weeks old, depending on when they brought the baby into the office. If there was a significant problem, it could very well be that the baby stayed in the hospital and did not have a coax. And again, if they were married already, they weren't getting divorced or having family planning issues.
Yeah. As far as I understand it, the Dori Shurim program, the program of genetic counseling, checks if couples have genetic issues before the match is arranged. So they're coming to you already after all of that.
No, they never asked me. And before anybody got married in Williamsburg, they did blood tests to see if they were compatible. And the Dori Shurim is an organization that takes blood tests from all the teenage boys and teenage girls when they're ready to get married. And everybody gets a number. And when there's a match, before they make a final decision, you go to Daria Sharm and they ask, is number 5 okay with number 10? And if that's okay, then they will, these will not have genetic problems, most of the genetic diseases. It's not all of them, but most of the Jewish familial illnesses.
It's interesting that many people think that goes against religion. There are some religions where genetic counseling maybe sounds like tampering with...
Okay, I don't think that's against the halacha, against the Jewish religion. I do know that in certain hospitals in Israel and in the United States, there can be testing if you've had babies born with a genetic problem. They can test the ova before it develops to see if that baby, if that ovum has a problem with that same disease. So I don't know if the Hasidic community is doing that or not, but here in Israel, there's a very good clinic in Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, which is where most of them go for their deliveries. Mostly Haredim go there.
Do you know what kind of deliveries people were doing? Were they doing in hospital or were they doing at home?
Doing what? The testing?
No. Do you know what kind of birth deliveries people...
Almost everyone goes to the hospital. There are very few who delivered at home. I know that Hatzalah delivers a lot of babies because when you have baby number 8 or 9, it can be just a few minutes. You have a few pains and you push and the baby comes out. So my son is on Hatzalah and he did deliver, I think, 1 or 2 babies already, much more than me. I didn't deliver any babies.
Can you speak more about what Hatzalah is and what your experience with them was?
Hatzalah is an emergency medical service that's found in many different Jewish communities. They're trained. Some are EMTs, just like the fire department or the EMS from the city. Some of them are paramedics. They have medical supervision. Because of the way they're located, they are in the community, and they use their own cars to go from place to place. Sometimes if you're in an apartment building, they're in the same building, and you knock on your neighbor's door and he's the medic, and they'll come in and they'll treat you no matter what time of the day or night, no matter what time of what day of the year. And there are many, many in Williamsburg. That's where Hatzalah started. In fact, I was asked to see if I wanted to see the original Hatzalah office. Hatzalah office was someone's dining room table with 2 phones or 3 phones. This is before computers. And he would answer the phone. People would call in. He would call out and transmit it on the radio for people to go to this address. And the response time is always faster with Hatzalah than it is with the city.
Did you hear of the controversy in Borough Park around Ezras Nashim, a female organized volunteer EMS service?
Yeah, I didn't hear about it specifically, but I know there's a problem because in the Hasidic community, many men do not want women to touch them at all. And if they don't want them to touch them, so it's very difficult to be an EMT working on a man who doesn't want you to touch him. Be a female. So personally, I don't see any problem with it. My primary care doctor here in Israel is a female I go to a female dermatologist, and halachically, just as I can treat women, a female can treat a man. But they feel very uncomfortable, and they don't want that to happen. So,
to clarify, women are more comfortable being treated by a man, usually, or it's more common for women to be treated by a man than for a man to receive services from a female practitioner.
Probably, yeah. Well, that's accepted in society, and that you have to just change your thought process and say, men and women have the same capability, and but it's not going to happen that fast in the Hasidic community.
I mean, I think in the Hasidic community, it has a lot to do with men being very uncomfortable, being very sheltered from women, and being very uncomfortable with physical contact from women. It's really about modesty and insularity than it is about not wanting to use a female practitioner, because the same men who wouldn't want to be touched by a woman, their wives would receive services from a woman, like their doctors would be women.
I know that one of the men on the block, who was a Rebbe, would come to me to draw his blood because he didn't want to have the woman phlebotomist come into his home and draw the blood. So he would come to my office and I'd draw his blood.
You would have rabbis come to your office in general?
Not routinely, but this gentleman did come. He was down the block and he came to my office. Occasionally they would want me to go to their homes to give them vitamin B12 shots, to give them strength before Yom Kippur, because they felt that vitamin B12 gave them strength. I don't think that's true, but they thought it was true. So if, as a placebo effect, if that worked, then fine. So I would go to their homes and we would talk a little bit. It was very nice.
Did you have any experiences with particularly big, important rabbis? And no naming names.
No naming. No, there was one rabbi that I went to on a weekly basis to give him a vitamin B12 shot. And he would want me to give for his wife and some others. Okay. So I would wait around and we would talk. So this happened a number of years ago, maybe 20 years ago, during one of the wars in Israel and Lebanon. And there were a lot of people, a lot of Israelis who were getting killed. And this rabbi asked me, has there been any injuries or deaths with our boys? And he used the terminology "our boys," meaning the Israelis. Now the Williamsburg is made up mainly of Satmar, and Satmar is known to be anti-Zionist and anti-Israel. So they would not include Israeli soldiers in our boys. But this Rebbe couldn't make it public, but he could say our boys. So to me, that was very, very significant. Although since October 7th, when the Neturei Karta, which is a very right-wing, radical group, not very many, had demonstrations with the pro-Palestinian demonstrations, anti-Israel, Satmar came out publicly and said they are not part of us. The Neturei Karta are not part of Satmar, meaning that we don't agree with what they're doing, which to me was something special.
Yeah. So you're a Zionist, right?
Oh, yeah. The people all the people knew that when I took vacation, usually once or twice a year, I came to Israel.
Did people comment on it? Did you have any interactions with the Satmar Hasidim about your Zionism?
I tried not to, because I don't need to have unnecessary fights. One woman mentioned that it's the worst thing that ever happened to the Jewish people, that the state of Israel was founded. So I disagreed with her vehemently, and we spoke about it, and she never came back to the office. But her parents still brought the other siblings, and the other siblings brought their kids. So this was in 39 years being there. One patient left me because I was a Zionist. But they all knew that I came here. In fact, one woman said to me specifically that she was walking under one of the overpasses where the Brooklyn Queens Expressway goes, and somebody wrote something, death to Zionists or whatever. And she said she was so upset about that sign, that graffiti. She said, not all of us are like that. She wasn't Satmar. She was a different Hasidic sect. But she said, not all of us are like that. And I see patients here, Hasidic patients here. I was waiting to go on a tour of the Kotel. They have different tours under where the Kotel was excavated underwards. And I heard a little boy speaking in Yiddish to his mother. So I went over to him and I asked him if he made a bracha on the potato chips that he was going to eat in Yiddish. And the mother looked at me, Dr. Rosman, is that you?
Oh, that's so sweet.
She was patient because she knew this is what I did to the kids. The kids would eat in the office. I said, did you make a bracha? Did you make a blessing on what you're eating? That's also a way to develop some rapport with them because they know you have to make a bracha.
Wow, lovely. It must have given the kids a real kick that you would warm them up that way.
I think so. I think so. I think that's one of the reasons why I was always busy in the office. And Baruch Hashem, thank God, I had a very thriving practice. How
many patients?
I had a fun time. I'm sorry. How many patients did I see in a day? It depended on the day. There were certain days where I saw maybe 20 or 30. And when it was flu season, people were sick. I'd see sometimes many, many more, twice as many. And I would come home very late. Not the game, but that's part of the business. You have to keep the practice open. One thing I did know, when I started the practice at the beginning, we had appointments, as most normal doctors' offices. 1/3 of the patients never came in for the appointments. 1/3 of the patients came an hour or 2 hours late for the appointments. So I said, I can't run an office this way because I'm only seeing 1/3 of the patients that make appointments. So we had no appointments, and it was first come, first serve. You sit, you write your name down, and I said, anybody who writes their name down, I will see them that day. It might not be, if I'm scheduled to be there till 5 or 6, it may be not at 6 o'clock, it may be later, but I will see everybody who signs in.
Why were people coming an hour or two late? Is it the cultural thing?
Yeah, we made appointments not a month before or 2 months before. We made appointments that day or the day before. They knew when they were supposed to come in, and they didn't. Why? You have to ask some of the Hasidim why. But they just didn't care. They thought, I made an appointment, I'll come in whenever I feel like it. But you can't run an office that way.
Yeah. Did you walk in Williamsburg and suddenly see an adult who you had served as a baby, and they'd be like, "Oh, this is my pediatrician"?
This is what they did. It was very. I had a fun time being there, and I have to say most of the patients liked what I did. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come back. At the end, there were many, many pediatricians around. I mean, I would normally work half a day, either 9 to 1 or 8:30 to 1, something like that, or 2 to 5 or 6. and my partner would be there on the other half. So he made appointments, and he always complained that they didn't keep their appointments. I said, no, he wanted it that way. So he said, okay. I said, look, I told you not to.
Something I was curious about, did people give you food gifts?
Oh, routinely not, but on certain holidays, yes. On Purim, they would bring shalach manot. It's a custom to bring, it's a mitzvah, to bring food gifts to friends on Purim. So this is before Purim, but people would bring me a lot of different types of food, cooked fish, kugels, whatever. On Hanukkah also, we had a lot of cakes and whatever. And when I went to this rabbi his Rebbe that I mentioned to you that I would see on a weekly basis, his wife would give me a bakery size sheet of cake that we'd have to cut up and put in shopping bags. And that was on a weekly basis. And my kids knew that was, we didn't get nut cake this week. We only got chocolate cake. But no, they're very generous, and they're very nice.
Any questions you think I should have asked that you would like to bring up?
I mean, look, when I was in Williamsburg, I was there for at least half a day, every day of the week, almost, at least 4 or 5 days of the week. Occasionally, my wife would come and visit, and the patients knew her, not all of them, but I don't know if you're familiar. There is a bus from Borough Park to Williamsburg. And my wife at that time went to Borough Park to have her wigs combed and set and whatever. So she was carrying 2 wig boxes on the bus, got off at the right stop in Williamsburg, but did not know where my office was. So she stopped 2 young girls, must have been 11, 12, really young girls, and asked where Dr. Rosman's office is. If you're familiar with Williamsburg, this was on Bedford Avenue, and my office is on Rutledge, but right next to Lee. From Lee Avenue to Bedford Avenue is equivalent to about 4 or 5 city blocks. It's a humongous block. And these girls walked my wife to my office, insisted on carrying the wig boxes. And when they got to the office, they gave her the wig boxes. And then they went back down because they weren't coming up to Lee. They were going someplace on Bedford. So this is just the kindness that I found routinely among the Hasidim there. They would try their best to help somebody out. If you're familiar, the ladies' Bikur Cholim of Satmar brings food every hospital in Manhattan. And they give it to anybody who's Jewish. Doesn't make a difference if you're Hasidic or not Hasidic, but they will give anybody who has on their card that they're Jewish. And they have full meals. And it's a homemade meal that you don't get in the hospital usually. And this is what they do. They have buses that go, and they have buses that take volunteers who go to visit people in the hospital. They staff the Bikur Cholim room in the hospital. It's really, they're very nice people, and I had a very nice time with them.
Lovely, lovely. Well, I guess I'm gonna wrap it up here. I want to give a shout out to your lovely granddaughter for connecting us. I really appreciate that.
Love you, Kyle.
Yeah, Very, very grateful to Abigail and to you for your time. It was so nice to talk to you and hear about all of that.
Thank you.